of getting annoyed, Derek decided to leave it at that. Darn it, what a waste of a weekend and $600, Derek thought as he drove west on a beautiful road. Instead of the usual route on Interstate 84, Derek chose the scenic Columbia River Historic Highway to try and make the most of the disappointing weekend trip from Hood River. Derek was puzzled about why Zoe had agreed to spend the weekend with him. Looking back, he realized she hadn't seemed happy since they left Portland on Friday night. Their attempt at being intimate at the inn felt distant, like she wasn't really there. And when Derek interrupted her daydream, it only added to Zoe's irritation. Fortunately, Derek was unaware of Zoe's thoughts. She hoped that enduring 2 days and nights with her unpleasant husband would pay off. Zoe successfully arranged for Derek to leave town and gave Paul a key to the house. Paul needs to finish everything on his to-do list now. Zoe was surprised by how much she disliked someone to the point of considering her current actions. When did she start to hate her husband, the man she promised to love and cherish? It all changed 9 months ago. She had just returned home happy from shopping with new shoes and a dress, but Derek's questions quickly ruined her mood. On Saturday afternoon, Derek was shocked when Zoe told him she had spent $1,000 that day. Zoe was puzzled by Derek's reaction, as all he could talk about was the money they were putting into their 1920s craftsman house they purchased last year. That's when she realized she couldn't stand Derek anymore. I work on some Saturdays doing bookkeeping, but you went and spent $1,000 on clothes? What about the plumber's bill? How can you spend so much on clothes when we still owe the plumber $3,000? She didn't respond to Derek's questions. She just left the room crying and went into their bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Derek found the bedroom door locked. Zoe was sitting on the bed, thinking that at least something in the house was working. He knocked on the door and waited. After a short while, she opened the door, but instead of talking to Derek, she hurried past him. As Derek entered the kitchen, she emerged from the basement with 2 red Milwaukee tool cases. "Why can't I get nice things like these too?" she asked, holding up the cases. Derek looked bewildered. "I bought a power drill and a sander. I use both tools to fix things myself instead of getting help from a professional handyman or painter." She didn't know how to respond, so she chose to angrily leave the kitchen and tell him to go away. Their relationship stayed tense for the rest of the weekend. They didn't talk much and didn't kiss goodnight, even though they shared the same bed. When Zoe arrived at work on Monday, she was feeling frustrated and needed to talk about it. She ended up confiding in her coworker, Paul Roberts, who came by her desk to greet her and ended up listening to Zoe's problems. After being reminded by their boss to work, Paul proposed they chat during lunch. Between her salad bites, Zoe complained to Paul about being tired of budgeting. Paul listened attentively to Zoe's complaints. Paul thought Zoe was being rude, not considering her husband's feelings. But like any man interested in a married woman, he pretended to understand her completely. They decided to meet for lunch again on Tuesday. As a result, Zoe and Paul had lunch together every day that week. By Wednesday, Paul started saying mean things about Derek, suggesting he didn't realize how great his wife Zoe was. After just 1 month, Zoe believed that all the problems in her life were because of Derek, particularly the lack of money they had. Zoe wanted a house with a yard before having a child, so she suggested buying a fixer-upper. However, she ended up blaming Derek for the effort and money needed to make the house safe and livable. The plumbing, electrical system, woodwork, and floors were all old and needed repairs. Spending time with Paul made Zoe realize she had less respect for Derek. Eventually, Zoe started spending Saturdays with Paul instead. Her actions showed she had little respect left for Derek as she continued her relationship with Paul. The love Zoe had for Derek when they got married 5 years ago was gone. One day, Zoe was in bed with Paul, feeling satisfied after their second intimate moment. Zoe was deeply attracted to Paul, who made her feel incredible when they were together. Paul was able to please her 3 times in a row, something that amazed Zoe. The intense pleasure made her feel unbelievably good, almost causing her to faint when he was intimate with her from behind. Paul mentioned that he wished they could do it every day. Although Zoe enjoyed the idea, there was a concern. "It sounds great, but not really doable. If I leave Derek, I'd have to pay for half of what we owe. I had a chat with a lawyer about it already. I have to pay for half of the mortgage and all the other debts from buying that old house that needs a lot of fixing. Derek's income is the only thing keeping us financially stable. Even if we combine our incomes, we don't earn enough for me to divorce him and pay what I owe." Paul found it challenging to figure out the right time to talk about this. He had a plan to help the Millers with their money issues. Paul knew other people were struggling with debts too, but he thought it was best to wait a bit longer before sharing his idea. Paul started to mention to them on some Saturdays and during their lunches that money was the only thing causing issues between them. After talking about it for a while, Zoe mentioned something that had been on her mind for a while. It was about a life insurance policy that Derek had, worth a lot of money, and Zoe was the person who would get it if anything happened to him. Paul was really surprised by this news. "What do you mean?" "If we could figure out a way for him to pass away, I'd get the insurance cash and we could be with each other." Paul acted like he didn't understand. "Have you considered how we could make it happen?" "No, I haven't. I've never taken a life larger than a bug. I wouldn't have a clue how to do it or escape without getting caught. It wouldn't help us to hurt him and then land in jail." Paul nodded. "I think some people can get away with crimes easily," Zoe said, sitting up to face Paul. "Do you think you could kill someone?" she asked, suggesting a plan where it would look like a robbery gone wrong. Paul wasn't keen on the idea. He had watched movies like Body Heat, where a wife tricks someone into killing her husband, and he knew it never ended well. The wife gets to leave and receives the insurance money, while the man ends up being blamed for everything. Paul decides that for their plan to work, Zoe would be the one to commit the murder. Despite thinking about it a lot, he didn't want to appear too eager. Zoe and Paul were in bed discussing how to kill her husband. Paul kept quiet to hear Zoe's ideas. Her suggestions seemed unbelievable, making him struggle to hold back his laughter. Eventually, he couldn't contain himself any longer and asked, "Wasn't the electrical panel old?" Zoe confirmed, "Yeah, Derek found it difficult to get the correct fuse when needed. It uses traditional screw-in fuses. He asked me to go to a specific store to buy new parts when he discovered they had them. Derek wants to change the panel when we have enough money for it. That's how we'll catch him," Paul said. He showed how they could use pennies in the fuse socket to avoid the fuse. Paul explained to Zoe that they needed to ensure only Derek's fingerprints were on the coins. Zoe was shocked to hear this plan, as she never imagined she would be involved in something as serious as murder, especially considering her feelings for Derek in the past. Zoe knew that the $1 million insurance policy Derek had bought last year, when they talked about starting a family, influenced her decision. She worried, "Will they figure it out? How can I make it look like an accident? Has Derek told anyone about our problems? I can't recall when we were intimate last. Perhaps he's talked to someone about it, like a friend or colleague. If that's the case, you need to work on it. It's time to bring back the spark in your relationship with your partner. Show him you're still in love." "I'm not sure if I'm capable of that. Just being near him gives me the creeps. When he has sex with you, just remember the big reward waiting for us. $1 million can help you bear with him. Imagine how much time it would take working at Koppel & Sons to earn $1 million. Zoe considered the idea, but she found it difficult to envision committing the actual murder at that moment. Thankfully, Paul was also excited. Zoe put off thinking about it and sat on Paul's lap before they had some fun together. After their enjoyable time, Zoe got ready to leave. She showered, got dressed, and felt happy. But then Paul spoke up. "This is goodbye for now, Zoe. We can grab lunch here and there, but we need to lay low until we deal with the problem. It's risky if anyone sees us looking at each other or notices you exiting my place." "Seriously, Paul? Do you actually want me to go without seeing you for the next while?" "Think about it, Zoe. Do you want to end up in jail for a long time? Do you want to pretend with Derek for a while? Or do you want to relax with me on the beach for years to come? Make a choice, because if you're not fully committed, we're done. It's either everything or nothing." The idea of losing Paul made Zoe agree to the plan. After she said goodbye, she drove back home. For the following 6 weeks, Derek felt like he was living with the woman he married all over again. They kissed with love, she cooked his favorite meals, and she enjoyed spending time with him. Zoe did such a good job of acting like a loving spouse that Derek started to wonder if he had made a mistake. Every Monday, Zoe would excitedly share with her coworkers about the lovely weekend she had with her husband, full of romance and fun activities. After a month of hearing this, Paul decided to talk to Zoe privately during lunch. "Why are you saying that, Zoe?" "Paul, you won't believe it. I'm following your advice, pretending to adore Derek. Everyone at work thinks I'm head over heels for him, and I bet Derek's colleagues are hearing the same thing too. He's falling for it, hook, line, and sinker." Zoe laughed with excitement. "And you know what's great? I haven't had to have sex with him many times. I said I had a yeast infection and suggested we masturbate together instead, which he really liked. I had to do some sexual favors for him as well.